What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA show powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with 150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/All-NBA. I'm your host, Adam Mares. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, as I always am on Fridays from Hoops Tonight over at The Volume. It's Jason Timpf. JT, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm especially excited for today's format. We've kind of gamified ranking some NBA stuff. I think this is going to be a fun topic for us to get into a bunch of the top teams in the league.
I think it will be, although I got to say I'm a little shook because on Wednesday, Legs and I were given our predictions for who is going to have a breakout season, and I picked Walker Kessler, or guys who have impressed us so far. I picked Walker Kessler, and 30 minutes after the show, he was ruled out for the entire year. So I might have the kiss of death right now. It's got me shook. I'm not going to lie.
He has looked awesome to start the year. I've been a big believer in Walker for a while. I feel like I can't believe he's still on his rookie contract. It feels like he's been in the league longer than he has, but I think it's because from the moment he got into the league, everyone's just talked about him nonstop.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, man, we don't have to spend too much time on this, but losing a year at this age is such a big deal. Especially because the Jazz have slow played his development anyway. It's like they've taken the long view of it, and then all of a sudden you cut one entire developmental year out, and it's like that stuff I think affects a player's trajectory. It certainly affects their money, their long term. What are they going to get? But it affects their trajectory too. So it's unfortunate. And by the way, on today's show, we're going to basically snake draft who we think are the best starting lineups in the NBA. And I made a joke in our group chat as we were preparing for the show. I was going to take the Jazz #1 because statistically their starting lineup is unbelievable. A little tongue in cheek, but it was kind of fun. I always like when, especially if you're a bad team, do something interesting that's fun to talk about. And they did this weird 3 7-footer lineup that all had this unique kind of more versatile than you would expect skill set. And it was fun. And I'm kind of bummed that we got robbed of it.
I know. On the one hand, like you look at Walker Kessler as the kind of guy who's like a legitimate trade asset too, as a guy that you could get without having to match a ton of salary, but then kind of re-sign at whatever you think is a fair number. And he's a real foundational type of player. But at the same time, to your point, like I think if I'm Utah, I'm looking at him as my foundational center. So with that being the case, I think if you're Utah, if anything, it just kind of closes the door on the trade as an option and kind of makes you think of him as more, because like there's an outside chance you get like a first round, maybe 2 first-round picks for him if he's healthy, right? So like it's one of those things where it almost like kind of simplifies their decision-making process. But I'm going to tell you, Adam, they did not make my top 35 line.
So if I take them in the 5th pick, I'm safe. I don't need to use my first pick on them. That's funny. Well, we're gonna talk a lot about this, but I didn't even prep you for this, JT. So right off the start, I'm throwing you a curveball. But do you have any quick takes? I did not watch the game last night. There was only one game, which by the way really bugs me. As somebody who does a Friday show, it bugs me that we only had this one game to talk about. But the Suns did get a win in Jalen Green's return to action, 115-102 over the 3-5 Clippers. I didn't prep you for this, so I just thought I would ask you quickly because I always want to give a little shine to the teams that played. Do you have any thoughts about Jalen Green's return or the Suns getting a win?
So I watched the first quarter live, and then I watched this morning. I went back and basically watched all of Jalen Green's possessions just to kind of see how he looked. Jalen Green looks exactly like Jalen Green. He's like the quintessential modern scorer, but like almost like in a tunnel vision context, in that like, man, he's going to take a lot of these kind of iffy catch and shoot and pull up threes, like catch and shoot shots that aren't particularly open or that are out at like 26, 27 feet, or these like pretty tough dribble combination footwork pull up threes. But when he hits them, his teams have always been really hard to beat when he's hitting them. There were some crazy stats last year with him with Houston where when he was hitting, Houston was like damn near undefeated. And so there's a certain amount of like feast or famine with him. But when you're getting the feast, he's actually a really dynamic player. But at the same time, like you're not seeing high level reads. You're not seeing much in terms of like processing when he's attacking in the half court. And then the last thing I'd say is I'm just generally really disappointed in the Clippers to start this season. I think all of their stars to varying degrees have looked pretty mediocre. Bradley Beal was a disaster last night. The Chris Paul bench units have not been good for the most part. They've gotten a little better in the last week, but they have not been as good as they've needed to be. They haven't. I kind of spoke highly of the Clippers as a team that I expected to be a top 4 seed this year, and they've been underwhelming. The last thing I'll say is like I don't, in the Western Conference, you're a good week while one of your rivals has a bad week away from jumping 4 spots in the standing. So it's never too late or anything like that. But I've just been underwhelmed by them to start the year.
I mean, 3-5, you're right that it's so early. The standings are going to jump a bunch, but you do start to look at teams that are just behind the 8 ball because of how hard it is to make up games in the Western Conference the later you get into the season. So some teams have started off hot, built a little bit of a cushion. Shout out Oklahoma City, who was nobody's surprised about that, but even San Antonio. And then there's some teams that are behind the 8 ball, and the Clippers are definitely one. By the way, Suns 4-5. I kind of had them as one of these teams that could be horrible and in the lottery. I still think that's going to be what happens. They're in the lottery in some capacity, but 4-5, not too bad. Not too bad. All right. Most of today's show, though, all of today's show is going to be about starting lineups because we want to talk about a bunch of different teams, and we're going to frame it through the lens of who has the best starting lineup. And to do that, we're going to play a little game as we like to do on these Friday shows with me and Timpf, which is we're going to draft, see who can assemble the best collection of them. James, did you prepare who gets to go first today, or are we just going to do I have to be a gentleman and offer him the first pick?
I know it pains you, but you have to be a gentleman again.
Oh, okay. All right, Tim. I'll be a gentleman.
You're gonna let me poach the Nuggets again? What are we doing here?
Well, I kind of like, to be honest, as I was laying out like my big board, there was really a top 3. So giving the first pick might be all right. I'll let you have it, so I get picks 2 and 3.
This is actually I love. Before I even give my number one, I like how you said you were talking about the 3. I kind of look at there's 5 teams that I was one of the things I was looking at was just like sheer talent. Right. And when I did my player rankings this summer, I had a top tier superstar tier, which was like 1 through 4. And then there was like a second tier superstar tier that was like 5 through 14. And within the tiers, everyone's really close. Like the top 4 guys are all pretty close except for Jokic. And then from 5 to 14, it's all pretty close. And it like you go past that from like literally from 15 all the way to like 40. Everyone's really close. Like you could argue dudes that are as low as 40, but as high as like 16, depending on how you feel about that particular player. So when I look at that tier, like those are the tiers, right? Your top tier stars, your second tier stars, and your third tier stars. There are 5 teams on this list that I think have 3 of those top 3 tiers of stars. And we can kind of get to that further on down the line. But when you mentioned that top 3, I kind of looked at a cutoff point. After I got to that 5th team, I'm like, there's considerably less like top end talent on the rosters. But I took Denver
my own
Nuggets
big board real quick. Well, hold on. My own big board personally is the same. Where you're right. It is a top 5. I have a top 3 that I really trust. There's other 2 teams that I think I should trust, but it's probably personal bias. But after that, I might get a little draft fever. Like where I have my board, but I might blink when I gets to be my turn. So I think you're right that 6 through whatever is going to be a little different. But okay, go ahead.
There was a big drop off for me at that point, which I thought was fascinating. But okay, so the Denver Nuggets at number 1 for me, by far the most continuity between all of the cores that we're looking at. So like the Gordon, Murray, Jokic group, we have 5 years of them together. The Jokic Murray duo, with a year out because of Jamal Murray missing it with a knee injury, they still have 9 seasons together. This is their 9th season playing together. Crazy. So there's a ton of continuity there. There is consistent statistical dominance with this group. If you take just that trio, so Gordon, Murray, and Jokic, they're plus 14 net to start this season, according to Cleaning the Glass. They were plus 15 net last year, according to Cleaning the Glass. Plus 14 net in 2024, according to Cleaning the Glass. Plus 15 net in 2023. And before Jamal Murray got hurt in 2022, they were plus 17 net in a pretty small sample. So like they literally every year in, year out, those 3 dudes just kick everybody's butt. It's been a consistent trend for a really long time. The full starting 5 with Cam Johnson and Christian Braun is just plus 8 net to start the year, but they had a rough first couple of games. That's been very good over the course of the last week and a half or so. The rise of Christian Braun and Cam in the trade for Cam Johnson has made them pretty athletic. Like they have a decent amount of team athleticism relative to some of the other bigger, slower lineups around the league. They still have great size, tons of shooting in that lineup. I think the weakest shooter there is Christian Braun, and if he's wide open, I still feel like that shot's going in. There's tons of collective basketball IQ. They have an unstoppable two-man game with Murray and Jokic, but they have all these other options. Aaron Gordon can attack out of the post. Yeah, Gordon and Jokic have a good amount of two-man game. They're barely scratching the surface of what they're eventually going to do with Cam Johnson. They're a great transition team as well. And there are enough high IQ defenders in there and enough athletes that they've consistently shown the ability to get stops when they need to in the postseason. And lastly, they have a ton of playoff experience, proven at the highest levels. So for me, and you're like, when you get into the debate with Oklahoma City, it's like you're not factoring in the fact that they can bring Cason Wallace in off the bench, or that they can bring Alex Caruso and these waves of perimeter defenders. We are focusing on the starting lineup. And to me, Denver, that 5 is the best 5 in the league.
So you touched on the IQ part of it, and you can even probably say like offensive versatility. They're right there. I think there's 3 teams that stand out. They'll probably be the 2 picks of mine coming up next are probably also there, which tells you what I value so much: your collective IQ and ability to kind of form into what you need in high leverage situations. Denver obviously can do that. You mentioned the continuity. The questions I have for them, like if there's some weaknesses to them, they're not. You mentioned the athleticism. I don't know that they're very athletic, though. Jokic, obviously not athletic. Cam Johnson is tall and long, but he's not really athletic. Jamal Murray has a certain type. He has size, but since the injury, he hasn't really been a guy that gets into the paint, pass guys, plays above the rim or anything like that. Christian Braun has a certain type of athleticism, but he's not long. He has the negative wingspan, so it's not like a Jaden McDaniels type of athleticism that can cover all this ground. And then Aaron Gordon, who is your super athlete, has shown some signs of slowing down from what he was even 2 seasons ago, 3 seasons ago when they won the championship. So that's one of the things that I think is weak about him. But the big question is, Cam Johnson so far to start the season does everything right. I think he's going to read the court extremely well. He's still figuring out the rhythm. But the shot-making gap between him and Michael Porter, I thought was going to be pretty small, pretty negligible. But so far, he can't make a shot. He's not shooting with confidence, and he's not getting shots off, which is another thing. Like Michael Porter, for whatever you thought of him, he had a little bit of daylight. He'd elevate and get the shot up. Cam Johnson right now is seeming like he might struggle to get shots off at the volume that Denver wants. Do you think that's just an early season thing, or is that potentially a thing that they are weaker than they were in years past?
So really quickly on the athleticism piece, I just mean relative to the big skilled teams, because there's like small and fast, and then there's big and skilled. And so, for instance, I think the Nuggets are substantially more athletic than the Lakers. Let's put it.
Lakers
that
are
way,
pretty unathletic though.
In their starting lineup. That's kind of more what I'm getting at. I think that there's an element of the ability to hang, so to speak, that they have that a team like the Lakers doesn't have, and that's why I have them above. The Cam Johnson stuff is really fascinating to me, and I actually look at it, to me, I think it's really interesting juxtaposed with Tim Hardaway Jr. to start the year, because Tim's been great. And one of the reasons why he's been great is he hasn't seen a shot he hasn't liked. Like he's just like he's gunning, and it's been working for him. Whereas I feel like Cam has been trying so hard not to rock the boat. And I think that has led to him essentially, like, I don't want to say he's lost his confidence, but he's lost any rhythm that he had from previous seasons in that specific context of him trying so hard not to rock the boat. I think the blame goes both ways here. I think that the Nuggets starting lineup can get a little Murray and Gordon heavy sometimes with the way that they run their action, for good reason. It's their best action.
Yeah.
So but there's a certain amount of, like, I think they need to invest in Cam and empower him a little bit more than they have. But the second piece of it, and this is to blame Cam, like, Cam's got to be aggressive. Like, to your point about Michael Porter Jr. Did take 4 or 5 questionable contested shots every game last year with Denver. That was part of what made him such a dynamic scorer. And, like, yeah, you'd live with that. You'd live with the bad questionable shots, because in the large sample, it was what fueled his confidence and his ability to hit, those contested catch and shoot threes that ended up being such big shots for them, especially in the postseason. So I think I still remain bullish on the Cam piece. Like, there was a couple sequences in their last game where he would, like, get handed a grenade late in the shot clock, and he'd be able to cover a good amount of ground on the dribble and like get a shot up on the rim that
put it on the rim.
Jokic could go get a rebound. Or like there was one where he dribbled way out of the left corner with like 4 seconds on the shot clock and generated a catch and shoot 3 for Aaron Gordon on the right wing, just simply because he's got speed off the dribble. And so he did hit a couple of big catch and shoots during their run. So like, I think that they're progressing in the right direction. That's a good Miami Heat team that literally beat the Clippers a couple nights earlier. Obviously Bam goes out, but like that, I think they're progressing in the right direction. I just think Cam needs to be more aggressive. And I think as a team, as a lineup, they need to work to empower him and remind him that they're going to be at their best if Cam's being aggressive.
Denver's one of these teams that's 7 games in, and it's still hard to tell just how good they are because they look really good. Their net rating is through the roof. Their starting lineup, to your point, when it looks good, it looks phenomenal. But they lost to the 2 best teams they've played. They've beat some nobodies, and it's just hard. Like sometimes a 7-game sample size, you can't quite tell. I think they're going to get tested next week in particular when they go on the road and play some good teams, and we'll find out a little bit more about them. My last note on Denver. Last year in the playoffs, the Thunder really honed in on the idea of Christian Brown getting catch and shoot threes is by far their worst option. Even if we leave him open, it's better than whatever Denver generates. They generate an enormous amount of pressure on the rim because of Jokic. And so let's just force that. And I still wonder if that's the weak link in a playoff series. If you get into games 5, 6, and 7, and teams just say, all right, Christian Brown has to beat us. He has to have 30 points tonight, and we're going to give him open looks. If he misses a couple like he did last year, just starts driving into traffic because he's uncomfortable with it, he still hasn't proven to me that he's a consistent enough volume shooter that he can get it done. So I like it. I'm with you. I think Denver's up there. I would not have taken him number 1, but maybe just because I didn't want to be called a homer. I had him 1A, 1B, 1C, and that's why I'm glad that you took him. So I get the next pick, and I'm going to take the Oklahoma City Thunder. We already know what they are. This is the best two-way, probably the best two-way lineup that you're going to get. They have a clear identity. You mentioned continuity. It's not 9 years, but it's enough. That group knows exactly who they are and what they're trying to do. They can score through multiple channels. Obviously, spreading things out and letting Shea operate, we know that works. MVP last year and a championship. But the development of J-Dub, which we will hopefully see before too long, the development of Chet as a person who's able to create offense and just be a release valve, another option for you, to me is really good for a second and third option. If you say we like what works number 1, but if somebody really goes all in on taking that away, what is your release valve? Those are 2 really good release valves in my opinion. And then defensively, you can't score on that group. I mean, they just are an unbelievable defensive lineup. Their strength is their ability to slot guys in one at a time, and they kind of maintain the rhythm. So they almost get discounted because their bench is so good. But if we threw that part away, I would still look at the starting lineup and say, yeah, they can guard everybody. They can score on just about everybody, and they know who they are and they have the chemistry. So I'm taking them with my first pick.
So I had them at number 2 on my list. I'm looking at the lineup with Hartenstein as the bigger look specifically, but I guess you could there's a couple of these teams like Oklahoma City falls into this mix, the Lakers fall into this mix. There's I would even argue Houston falls into this mix where it's like they kind of have like 6 or 7 starters, so you can kind of just pick whichever one you think makes the most sense. But with Hartenstein, they were plus 15 net and 365 possessions last year. It's weird because they don't have a single knockdown shooter in that lineup. Like, of those 5 guys, Lou Dort led the team in 3-point percentage last year in the playoffs at 34%. That was their best shooter in that lineup. They had some remarkably poor offensive nights in the playoffs as a big part of that specific issue, the lack of shooting in that lineup. But that's why I'm not as high on Oklahoma City as some of my peers in the business. But the defensive talent is just completely outrageous. Like, I actually think Lou Dort's the best defensive player on the perimeter in basketball, specifically because he's allowed to beat the living heck out of you. and he gets away with it. And that specifically in the playoff context is such a rhythm disruptor when you have a guy that's allowed to just literally just beat the heck out of your opposing star for 48 minutes. Then they have this bona fide 2-big look. And Chet, to me, is the guy that really ties it all together because I actually think Chet's one of the top 3 or 4 defensive players in the world already. He basically can guard anybody in the league one-on-one except for Jokic. He's an excellent rim protector, but he also plays a lot of excellent help side low man defense off of Hartenstein. He's a guy that can blitz. He's a guy who can switch. He can play up to the level. He can play a deeper drop. Really, his only weakness is defensive rebounding relative to his size. But that lineup with Hartenstein on the floor rebounded very well last year defensively. They grabbed like 75.5% of available defensive rebounds. So like they have the two anchors, this like world beating perimeter defender and like one of the best defensive anchors at the center position you can have. And then J-Dub is like this excellent, versatile wing defender, like an all defense level guy. Shea is fine. I think he's a little bit overrated on defense because he can float around and get lost and help sometimes, but he's certainly not a weak link. He's a guy that's going to be able to make defensive plays. And when you have that strong of a foundation and good enough players around, they can break teams. And that lack of shooting and susceptibility, that's what drops them to number 2 for me, because I just think they're way more susceptible to cold spells on offense than Denver is. But like, to me, the difference between these two teams last year was depth. And that kind of doesn't factor into this equation. When Denver went to their bench, they fell apart. In one of the pivotal games of the series, in game 4, I believe, the Nuggets were positive with Jokic on the floor. They were -6 when he was off. That was where they lost the game. Like, Oklahoma City has waves of guys like Cason Wallace and Alex Caruso and Aaron Wiggins that just maintain that identity of defense to transition that Oklahoma City brings to the table. So that's what slotted them at number 2 to me, but it is definitely close, and it's hard to argue with the metrics that you get from that group.
I see a comment here that says Nuggets can let Dort shoot threes, same as OKC does with CB. And while I think there's some truth to that, one, Dort won them a playoff game and really won them the playoff series last year for that same exact reason. OKC was leaving CB open. He couldn't make it. Denver was leaving Dort open, and he went like 3 for 3 in the fourth quarter, which led them to that comeback win. And that was the swing in the entire series. And I think there's something too. Denver's offense is so efficient that it almost puts pressure on guys like CB, and I think Cam is dealing with this a little bit as well, which is Denver's generating the exact looks they want every time. So when you catch the ball on a kick out, it's like, well, now this is the pressure because I'm not forfeiting something that was great otherwise. And I think with some of these other teams, it's easier to get a shot off because it's like, yeah, we like just take the shots where you get them or try to rebound. We're going to defend. Our anchor is our defense. So don't feel the pressure to score. Denver's not exactly that way, but Oklahoma City, to me, I value connectedness. I value guys that know what they're trying to do. And OKC just never colors outside the lines, maybe more so than any team in the NBA. Their starting 5 knows what their jobs are, what their roles are, and they all seem extremely happy to do it. And it's why they're such a great regular season team and the reigning champs. So I've got them right there. I am predictable because I saw someone in the comment predict my next one. My next pick in the second round, I'm going to take the Golden State Warriors. And this is the 3. There's some things I like. Oh, by the way, look at your little cartoon head here, JT. You see that? Welcome to the All City family there.
The team now.
What's that?
I said, this means I'm an official member of the team now. I got my cartoon head.
And it also means you can never cut your hair. So now you're stuck with this look. So we're not redrawing it. Golden State Warriors. So again, I value connectedness. Obviously, you have to have talent, but I value, does your team know what they're trying to do, and does everybody fit into that? When those guys are healthy, I just trust them to do pretty much anything. They all move the ball. They all know exactly who they are. Jimmy Butler makes the plays when they need to be made. Draymond Green, somehow, we talk about all these guys aging and how they're still playing, like KD, LeBron, how are they still at this level? Defense is almost harder. And when you're an undersized defensive player, what Draymond does, I would predict would fall off. Like he'll fall off a cliff at some point because it's so hard to do the things he does. Hasn't fallen off a cliff. He still can affect games defensively at this insane rate. And then, of course, Steph Curry, everybody has to work around Steph Curry and what he's doing to optimize it, maximize it. All of those guys can do it. Give me a playoff series with that starting 5, and they're going to go toe-to-toe with either of the other 2 teams we've already taken.
So I had the Warriors down at 6. So this is our first major disagreement. They're off of that top 5 group where I think all of those top 5 have like 3 dudes that you can definitively say are in the top 3 tiers of stars in the NBA. I think the numbers are strong. I'm not disagreeing necessarily with anything in principle that you're saying. Like their lineup has been great. So like, for instance, Jonathan Kuminga, Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, those 4 guys are plus 14 net to start the year. Elite on both ends of the floor. Jonathan Kuminga making just enough improvements as a read and react player has made them like functional with him on the floor with the starters, which I think is a key development. Steph has looked more like superstar Steph than star Steph to start the year. He's at 27 points per game at 63% true shooting. Jimmy's been great. There's all sorts of strong indicators there. I think I still come down to when I get with those three guys, I feel like the other two pretty consistently bring flaws to the table. So, for instance, bring Horford into the equation. I believe in a Jimmy, Draymond, Horford front court as a team that, as a group that could cause problems with their switchability and their high IQ, and I want to see that bear out. But that starting lineup with Horford has not been good to start the year, albeit in a small sample. Jonathan Kuminga has made improvements as a read and react player, but he's still a little turnover prone, and I'm not sure he's going to shoot 40% from three the entire season. And so I want to see a larger sample there, and I've just seen such a large sample of him looking clunky with those guys that it's going to take a large sample for that to kind of be a palate cleanser, so to speak. And then once you start going into the bench with like guys like whether it be Buddy Hield or Moses Moody or Brandon Pajemski, they all bring downsides in one phase or another. Like Moody, if he's hitting his catch and shoot three, is the obvious answer, but we've seen him go through extended stretches of being cold. Brandon Pajemski's a little feast or famine on offense, and I think he's an okay perimeter defender, but I don't think he's an elite perimeter defender. He's more of like kind of an all-around, do everything, rebound, screen, be in the right place kind of guy. They don't, I as much as I believe in their core three, I think the lineup just has a lot of options, but a lot of options with flaws that slide into those spots. So and the top end talent is good, but not so good that it can cover for some of the limitations. I'm higher on the Warriors than I was to start the season, but I still am looking at them as a second tier contender that is pretty flawed in some specific aspects.
I look at them almost the way I looked at them last year, which is I think the flaw for me comes down to more, are they going to be able to stay healthy and sprint through the tape? I mean, the age is going to show there. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were like a 6 seed this year and had to punch up. I just think that's probably the best route for them at this point. But you get me into a playoffs, I really value. It's funny that you keep referencing the tier list, right? They have this many guys in tier 1, 2, 3 superstar, because I almost don't look at basketball, especially in this era, in that way. It's very important. You factor it in. What's the raw talent? How many guys can do this or that? I look at it so much more as, do they fit together and do they all agree that their roles are what they are? And for the Warriors in the playoffs and just when they're at their best, they are 5 guys that can operate. And I'm putting Pods and Kuminga because I'm with you. They're guys that Kuminga point in particular, I think is fair because he was one of my least favorite players because of how little he seemed to try to fit in. And it is a small sample size. And by the way, there have been some bad games this year where I felt like he was outside the lines, but I've seen some enough early on for me to be optimistic that he is going to add the athleticism they need and this ability to just kind of like play within the system and then break through at the right moments. But you're right. 7 games is a very bad sample size to stake him doing that for the whole year based on what we've seen from him. All right, you want to go with your next pick here? You want to take your second pick?
So it's snake draft. So do I have 2 picks, or do we just go back and forth the rest of the way?
You have 2 picks now.
Okay. I'm going to channel my inner homer. I have the Los Angeles Lakers next.
Wow.
They are the only other lineup in this entire list that has a true bona fide top tier superstar. I think that matters. I think there are 4 guys that are transcendently great in the NBA right now. Jokic and Shea, who we already covered. Giannis, whose team is limited, and we may or may not get to him later on in the show. But then Luka Doncic is the other guy. Yeah. He's averaging 40 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists per game on 64% true shooting to start the year. He is operating at a different level than any other player on any of these other teams, other than the guys that we already named. So, I think that matters. The Lakers, despite all of the injuries, have had a 124 offensive rating with him on the floor to start the season. But it goes deeper than that. Austin, 31-9 on 65% true shooting to start the season. He's literally been one of the 15 best players in the league to start the year. And LeBron James made second team All-NBA last year. So I look at the 5 teams that I put on this list are Oklahoma City with J-Dub, Shea, and Chet. Denver with Gordon, Murray, and Jokic. Houston with the men, Kevin Durant and Şengün. Cleveland with Garland, Mitchell, and Mobley. And then the Lakers with Austin, LeBron, and Luka. Those are the only 5 teams that I think have 3 bona fide guys that are in those top 3 tiers of stars. And for the Lakers to essentially have, like, LeBron, when he comes back, is he going to be a top 10 guy? I don't know. But at the very least, he's going to compete for a third team All NBA spot. And so you've got that in addition to one of the true bona fide top tier superstars in the league, and Austin Reeves, who's blossoming into a legitimate upper tier shot creator in this league. And then the offense around those guys is incredibly polished. Like, Rui Hachimura is shooting 16 for 23 on unguarded catch and shoot threes this year. 16 for 23. He's shooting 17 for 24 from the mid range. He's shooting 68% at the rim. He's been the best spot up player in the entire NBA this year, converting those possessions at 1.56 points per possession. I'm looking at him as the 5th starter there, but if you add Marcus Smart instead, I'd argue they're even better with the connectivity and the two-way play. I just think you've got DeAndre Ayton, by the way, has been a hit. He's been scoring on the roll extremely well. That has been a masterful addition to kind of tie together their 4-out, 1-in spacing, as this was more of a 5-out team last year with Dorian Finney-Smith. I look at it as a team that's going to be, they're already top 5 in offensive rating, with LeBron missing the entirety of the season, Austin and Luka both missing extensive stretches. I think it depends on LeBron slotting into that tertiary role for them to reach their potential. But by the way, this same group, the Austin, Rui, LeBron, and Luka lineup, worked just fine last year. Last year, they had a 123 offensive rating between the 4 of those guys without a center. And now you're adding DeAndre Ayton to the mix. I just think this is one of the top 2 or 3 offenses in the NBA. And on the other end of the floor, they're showing that they can be a middle of the pack defense. I mean, they're 18th without LeBron, and LeBron's literally going to fix like half of their issues on the defensive end of the floor. I think that even myself, as high as I usually am on the Lakers, I think we all collectively as a basketball community underrated a Laker team that won 50 games last year, got Luka Doncic back in shape and at a much better level. Austin Reeves is better, and that added 3 starting caliber players without giving up anything in the offseason. I think we all underrated them coming into the year.
You might be right about the underrating part. And the Clippers faced this, I think, in the last couple of years, where it feels enough like, we kind of know who they are. So you almost suppress what their ceiling can be. So I think you're right about this. I mean, my question, though, the question about LeBron is a big one. First of all, the starting lineup: Luka, Reeves, Braun, Rui, Ayton. Is that the lineup you're going with here? Is that the projected when LeBron's back? Is it Smart instead of Rui?
So this is the biggest debate in the Laker fan base, is whether it should be LaRavia, Smart, or Rui. I think all 3 of them would work for different reasons. The reason why I think Rui is a guy that they'll look at is I think JJ probably wants to switch, and Rui's probably a guy that works in a switching scheme, whereas Smart
it's a
is more
huge
of a change
lineup. It gives you a lot of size. I mean, Luka, LeBron, Rui. I mean, that's like a really, really good size.
And Luka, yeah, like that's a huge lineup. And then the second piece of it is I think Marcus Smart and Jake LaRavia are more capable of operating in a bench role in terms of their emotions and confidence. I think Rui is the kind of guy that could spiral if you send him to the bench. So I think it'll be Rui, but I think the same conversation really applies regardless of whether it's Rui, LaRavia, or Smart, because all 3 of them impact winning in different ways, but all at a pretty high level in the context of playing alongside superstar talent.
I think it's a good pick. I mean, I hate to say it because I know, the Lakers are always a huge topic of conversation, whether they're good or bad, but I do think they're really interesting this year. And that's part of it, is this LeBron return, which, by the way, what is the latest on this? You're closer to Lakerland. He's starting to work out 1 to 2 weeks. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, so he needs to do some 5-on-5 work, but he's not going on the road trip. So I think there's 2 potential outcomes here. Either he plays some 5-on-5 with the G League guys and then comes back on the first home game after the road trip, which I think is like November 18th or something like that, if I remember correctly. Or he waits for the team to come back and he gets a couple practices in with them when they come back. Because there's a week there where they have only 1 game. It's like they play Utah and then the rest of the week they have off. I could see him getting some 5-on-5 in during that stretch and then joining shortly after that. But my guess is that he's back no later than that last week of November.
So they just become unbelievably interesting. And you are right that they have like high upside potential. I'm never a believer in Ayton. He is really good in the pocket. You're talking about finishing. He has like a good floater zone shot to him, good touch in the mid range. He finishes those plays really well. I still want to see what happens to him specifically when the games get tight, when the games get tough, because he's always been a guy that I just haven't believed in those moments. And it's possible that their playoff series comes down to two guys that you just mentioned, one Ayton, and then Rui Hachimura. You just mentioned the part about, I don't know if we can send him to the bench, this or that. Sometimes the margins are that small. I want to see how those guys perform when the going gets tough. It's also why I put the Warriors up so high. How is Jimmy Butler going to handle that? How is Draymond Green? How's Steph Curry? We know. We have a lot of data that says those guys are built for those moments. Those two guys I'm a little skeptical of. Let's take our first break. So we're halfway through the draft. So I'll let you get to your other pick on the other side, because the draft gets pretty interesting from here. There's two teams that I think are still above the cut. But then at the end of this draft, it's going to get really wild. First, NBA is up in action over at FanDuel. It's your home for live betting. So even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join, because FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/AllNBA. Very important to use our code, FanDuel.com/AllNBA, to sign up today. Play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. You know that moment, the one where you realize you left your favorite pair of sunglasses at the beach, on the roof of your car, or at a gas station 3 states away? We've all been there. I've been there too. But luckily, Shady Rays has changed the game. They have sunglasses that are made for real life. They're seriously good-looking, polarized, durable, and not stupidly expensive. And the wild part is, if you lose or break them, even on day one, Shady Rays will send you a brand new pair. No guilt trip, just replacements. Up here in Colorado, this is the time of year where the sun is kind of down in the south. The sun is kind of in your eyes when you're driving at all hours. It's never at a point where it's not in your eyes. So I have my sunglasses. I have 2 pairs of sunglasses that I literally sit in my the center dash, so that I always have them with me. So whether you're wearing them at the beach, on the road like I am, on hikes, concerts, wherever, they've got your back with that replacement guarantee. We've teamed up with Shady Rays to bring you an exclusive offer. Head to shadyrays.com and use the code AC35 for 35% off of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. All right, back here, segment 2. I'm with Jason Timpf for The Volume at Hoops Tonight. Make sure you're subscribed to his channel as well. We are snake drafting the best starting lineups in the NBA, and there are 4 down. You picked one that I had ranked 6th. I picked one that you had ranked 6th. So now I'm curious where you're going to go with your 3rd pick.
First of all, I loved the point you made about the sun here in Denver. So in Tucson, we have beautiful mountains there, but I lived in a house that was kind of down in a valley and facing in a way where we didn't have views of the mountains. And so that was very important to me when we moved here. I wanted to get a spot that had at least some view of the mountains. But what's crazy is I find myself closing the blinds every single afternoon because the sun is just
right
blasting. It's just blasting through those windows nonstop. It's like, the one thing though is then the sun disappears behind the mountains at like 4:30 p.m. And then you can finally open the windows and you get kind of like the post sunset there. I'm not complaining about Colorado. I love it here, but definitely the low sun is But anyway, I'm gonna go with, for my next pick, the Houston Rockets. Absurd metrics in the small sample. Only 115 possessions of that Okogie, Durant, Smith, and Amen Thompson alongside Şengün lineup. In those 115 possessions, they're plus 24 net. Some insane offense stats, 136 offensive rating. They have been shooting a little bit above their pay grade to start. I expect that to cool off a little bit. They haven't been as good defensively as you would think, and there's been a couple of specific areas that have shown up there. they're kind of big and upright compared to previous iterations of the team that were just a little bit faster with guys like Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks. And so I think that that's made them susceptible to some dribble penetration. It's made them susceptible to offensive rebounds, like long rebounds coming off of the rim where big guys are getting beat by smaller, quicker guards. They haven't been a very good transition defense. So those are like some of the little things that have shown up, but they've been like an unbelievably dominant offensive rebounding team. And they've been much better than I expected them to be offensively because their three main offensive shot creators are all so dynamic in such a unique way. Amen Thompson had his best game of his career the other night. His ability to just simply beat people off the dribble and get into the short range, where he's actually a very good short range shot maker as well as a rim finisher and playmaker, has made him like a defense breaking weapon. Kevin Durant's Kevin freaking Durant. And then Şengün, I mean, even last year he was kicking people's butts and kind of flying under the radar. He's getting a little bit more notoriety for it now, but like he's a problem as basically a mini version of Jokic without the higher level playmaking, but a guy that can really bully people into short range shot making and pick you apart. And so those three dudes just keep coming at you, and they get enough offensive rebounds that it makes up for any of the other kind of refined offensive skill limitations that they have. They're just a big problem. They're a big physical problem. I think the reason why I'm lower on them than most is I shouldn't say lower on them than most, but lower on them than you would think their metrics would lead you to believe, is just simply because I think they're a little bit more vulnerable to specific matchups because of their ball handling limitations, and they don't have a lot of continuity. So I think they're higher risk to go through cold spells and things like that when they get into the postseason. But the talent level is undeniable, and they present a lot of physical problems for a lot of teams. And anytime they walk on the floor, they have three dudes who are going to be a massive matchup problem for whoever you have on the floor.
I think this is the best value pick taken so far, meaning I think they're a team that probably could have gone as high as 3. I considered them at least there. The numbers, as you mentioned, are kind of crazy. They're plus 30 net rating. It's only been 32 minutes, so it's very volatile numbers. But they have two things that I think a couple things that I think make them a really, really high upside starting lineup. One is, as you mentioned, physically they beat you up. They have perfected this double big thing, and they have perfected this idea of being able to bully you. First of all, their starting lineup, going even just with Jabari, Şengün has become incredibly physical. Like, he really knows how to use his size. I think this is one of the differences to him. He's always been a big guy, but now he's using it. If you're too small for him, he's just pushing you out the way and getting to his spots, which makes him dominant. And then the physicality of Amen Thompson, Kevin Durant, Jabari, this is enormous length. And physically, there's just a lot of teams that don't match up at all athletically with you, that even if they have things that in theory could beat you shooting or passing or whatever, they're just so big that they're going to lessen your strengths off of that. And then you have to deal with what they do well. So to me, they could have gone higher. I think the big question with them is, we're talking about a starting lineup that has Josh Okogie at the moment. That's their starting lineup. It's hard to put them too high because it's so concerning. Jabari has been starting. Okogie's been there. They can go with the double bigs. This is another thing. There's a handful of teams here that I don't know what their like opening night of the playoff starting lineup is going to be. San Antonio falls into this. There's a handful of teams actually that fall into this where you I like what they're doing, but is that the lineup they're actually going to go to war with? I think they're a little bit in this category as well. But physically, to me, this is why they belong so high. That's one thing that's not going to go away. I'm not sure how many teams physically match up with them.
I think Dorian Finney-Smith, I actually put this in my notes, it just in parentheses. He's probably the guy that they end up going with when he's healthy. He's just such a good connective piece on both ends of the floor, a knockdown, catch and shoot guy. I think he fits too with what they try to do defensively with a lot of their switching in the front court. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think an underrated part with them too is their top three guys complement each other pretty well in the sense that they can play off of each other. So the ability for Şengün to constantly find Amen Thompson as a vertical spacer, this has been a trend over the last couple of years. That has allowed them to get some of those tic-tac-toe sequences where Kevin Durant comes off a ball screen and hits Şengün on the roll, who then hits Thompson on the cut. And you mentioned this at the top of the show, and it's something I absolutely agree with you about. I think on paper talent matters, but you got to complement each other. And there's no doubt that there is some natural connectivity between the three of those guys too, because they provide such unique skill sets.
You think they're going to get better or worse throughout the course of the year? Because you just mentioned that you're not sure if you're fully buying, the sample. They have some volatility where things could get clunky. Is this a thing where teams are going to have to figure them out and then they're going to have to adjust midway through the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we saw a little bit of this with the Spurs too, when Wemby was cooking in a lot of single coverage early in the season, and now you're going to see it. Everyone tries to
Right.
copy, right?
Yep.
I think with Houston, they're just experiencing a little bit of shooting that is outside of what these players are actually going to shoot over the course of the season. I think that will normalize a little bit. I don't think they're going to be the number one offense in the NBA when we get to the end of the season. Let's just put it that way. But I do think that they're a much better offense than I thought they would be to start the season. I don't want to say they're going to get worse over the course of the year. I think they're going to get better. I'm just saying I don't think they're quite as good as their metrics would lead you to believe right now.
Well, we're going to learn some about them coming up. They have San Antonio tonight. That should be very fascinating, at least. Then you get Milwaukee. You have Washington, Portland, by the way, very tough game. Orlando, Cleveland, Denver. That's the run they have coming up. All of those, all besides the Washington game, are like intriguing ones. So their mettle will be tested here coming up, but I think we're going to learn about them. I'm going to call them the best value pick, though, so far. I was hoping they would fall one more spot. I'll go to my next pick here.
Go where I think you're going to go.
Well, I'm going to go with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and this is another one for me that's kind of hard because I'm not sure what their starting lineup's going to be when everybody's healthy. Obviously, Mitchell, Garland, Mobley, Allen is your core. There's continuity there. You know what you're doing. Last year they went with Strus. He's obviously been out. You've got Hunter. I'm curious how it all shakes out at the end of the year. And then you're obviously a little shook just because of how this lineup has struggled in the playoffs in the past. I know there was injuries and different things going on, but it's still the thing that sticks out to me when you watch the Cavs play is how unselfish. Mitchell is the one guy that I think has the green light to be aggressive and to really like press, and for good reason. But everybody else seems to understand that they are working collectively on both ends of the floor. They rotate on defense really well. They protect the rim, and they pass and make swing passes at a really, really high rate. So they're another team that to me probably could have gone higher. But I'm not exactly sure. Like, what is their starting lineup at the end of the year, assuming everybody is healthy? Is that set written in pen?
I think so. I think it's Strus. I think he DeAndre Hunter has a level of aggression to him that I think makes more sense coming off the bench. Whereas Max Strus is a little bit more of like a connective off-ball scorer who I think can play in the flow without disrupting the rhythm as much. That lineup, too, was just awesome last year. The Mobley, Allen, Strus, Garland, Mitchell lineup was plus 12 net and 523 possessions, according to Cleaning the Glass. Like, Mobley just getting a little bit better as a catch-and-shoot guy to the point where, like, you kind of have to account for him there, and becoming a better ball handler kind of made their too big look viable, which then anchored them on defense because Mobley was Defensive Player of the Year. They had a 107 defensive rating with that starting lineup last year. Max Strus can take a primary point of attack role, which leaves Garland and Mitchell in more achievable defensive roles. And I think I was not a big fan of the Garland Mitchell backcourt in the early days. And I think there's a case that maybe Garland can't stay healthy enough to really realize the full potential of it. But to me, the Cavs are kind of similar to what I was talking about with the Lakers earlier, where like you have a disappointing playoff performance and then everyone gets off your scent, right? It's like, oh, they got 5 gamed by Minnesota. That must mean they suck. And it's like, well, actually they got a lot of good players and they're going to be in the mix. Cleveland, same thing. They have this disappointing showing against the Pacers and now everyone's off of them. But like, I look at it as like Darius Garland was hurt. His ability to consistently puncture the defense with dribble penetration when he's healthy is what greases the wheels for everything. It allows Donovan Mitchell to operate more as like the ceiling raising scorer rather than the guy who has the ball in his hands the entire damn game type of role, which I think is a better role for Mitchell is tip of the spear scorer, not offensive engine. And so all of it just kind of makes sense. And I generally am of the belief that if Darius Garland is healthy and moving like he did last year, I think the Cavs are going to win the East.
Here's another reason I had them lower on my board. I'm a huge Lonzo Ball fan. I talked about this with Legs a week ago when he closed the game and was phenomenal in the clutch with them. I kind of like him. And if there's this thing about Garland is your guy, you're committed to him and all this and that. When they get into a playoffs, if he's healthy, there's something that he brings to them with just like his length, his defense, his passing, his ability to kind of get in and make the right play, to play in transition, that I really like. And they have one of these rosters where I look at it and say, like, there's a lot of teams, who their closing lineup is no matter what. There's just no reason you would go away from it. They're one that I could see them getting into game 3 of a series and being like, you know what, let's close with, to your point, Strus or Lonzo or Hunter or something like that. And it creates a little volatility. But Cavs still deserve to be in this top list. The list drops off for me after this, though. And I hate that I have this pick because I kind of wish you had it. Because I don't want to take any of these teams, to be honest. I want to take whoever's left of all these teams. I think I'm going to go with the Knicks here. I think I'm going to go with the Knicks. I mean, look, they have a lineup that I still the other options I have on my list right here they're all teams that I have problems with. The Knicks at least have an identity around their top scorer, although that identity is shifting quite a bit in the early go. OG Anunoby is scoring a lot more. They have a lot of length, a lot of defense. Hasn't been the greatest so far, but I still like. I'm going to take them next.
Okay, so I had the Knicks a little bit further down on my list. I had them at 9th. The thing with the Knicks for me is I find them to have a little bit more of a ceiling on both ends of the floor in the playoff context relative to the regular season context. I view them as a regular season wins machine for a variety of reasons. They're extremely good at home. The Eastern Conference has an achievable night-to-night schedule. They're good enough on defense, especially with Mitchell Robinson on the floor, to churn out wins. The Jalen Brunson-led offense was awesome most of the year last year. Most of the criticism surrounding it stems from what happens when they get to the postseason. But inevitably, like, as much as I see the emphasis on transition play, which has been much better over their winning streak than it was to start the season, as much as I see the emphasis in Brunson being more off the ball, I still look at this as a team that is highly susceptible to degrading down into Brunson ball when they get to the postseason. And they just always at any given moment have two pretty vulnerable targets on the floor defensively. I've generally been lower on the Knicks than most people over the course of the last couple of years. I thought they were overwhelmingly unimpressive last year outside of their 4 wins against Boston, really from the start of the season all the way through the Pacers series. I didn't think they were overly impressive against the Pistons. I'm generally lower on the Knicks than most. I appreciate what they're trying to do, but I just look at them as a team that is built around a kind of a ball-stopping guard that's not as good as the other offensive players at the top of the league. A bunch of guys that can fill offensive roles in the regular season, but that have certain limitations when they get to the postseason, and then a defense that is straight up mistake prone when they get to face serious teams later on in playoff runs.
Are you encouraged at all, though, just by like the year OG has been having, the ball being in a few different people's hands? Because you just said they're going to regress back to that. New coach, new philosophy. It looks like they're trying hard. This is a little bit like the question we had with Donovan Mitchell, which in my opinion, when the going gets tough, he turns up the dial in a way that I think is actually bad, not good. It's not more efficient. It's just more volume. So do you really think that they're going to just be back to spread it out and let Jalen Brunson dribble around and try to score and it's all on him?
Well, so bringing Cleveland back into that's actually a really interesting thing. Like last year, Mitchell had the license in the form of the Garland injury. But what would have happened if Garland was healthy? Would they have continued to play the same style that they did in the regular season, or would Mitchell have grabbed the reins anyway? To your point, like so that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like I wonder if, first of all, in general, the transition play, the transition pushes, it does, even though it's still a factor in the postseason, it does become a lesser factor than what you see in the regular season. Half court basketball still reigns supreme when you get to that phase. And I just look at them as a team that's going to default to giving the ball back to Brunson, which has had a certain ceiling when they get to the postseason. But even in that context, I'm just generally lower on them because of those defensive limitations, because of the fact that it's like, okay, who are you deferring to? I like OG Anunoby, but he's not the same level as some of these other number 2 options around the league. I like Karl Anthony Towns, but I don't like him as much as some of these other players near the top of the league. I just look at them as like a team that is really good on both ends of the floor, statistically in the large sample, but that I don't see as a dead serious playoff threat because I view them as pretty limited on both ends when things slow down.
Jalen Brunson's percentage of his shots that are assisted is way up over last season. I mean, it's so early that a lot of these numbers, one game can flip it, but it's at least worth pointing out that he is like catching and shooting or finishing off of cuts and other plays more than he was in previous seasons. We'll see if it holds, but it's a fair
Yeah,
concern.
he's
All
getting
right.
more than twice as many spot up opportunities per game than he did last year, and he's converting them at a super high rate. I love all of it. I hope it sustains. I
Yeah.
do. I'm a little bit of a skeptic personally.
All right. So I'm curious where you're going to go the next, because like I said, all these next teams to me, you could go in any order.
I'm going to take Minnesota next. The metrics aren't very good. They're just plus 3.2 net last season with Gobert, Randall, Jaden McDaniels, Dante DiVincenzo, and Anthony Edwards. But every single postseason, they just tighten the screws with their size and physicality, and they become a problem. And one of the main reasons why I'm higher on Minnesota than I've been over the summer is Jaden McDaniels has made like a legitimate leap on offense. He's run 24 ISOs, post-ups, and ball screens to start the year, and they have a 117 offensive rating, including passes on those initiations. So he's doing more off the bounce. He's shooting 55% on catch-and-shoot threes to start the year. The main reason why I'm not as high on them as you would think for a team that made back-to-back Western Conference Finals is I straight up don't think they can beat Oklahoma City. I think it is like a complete insurmountable matchup problem for them because they're athletic enough to make life difficult for Ant on the perimeter, and they have rim protection, which is something that Ant has struggled with in the postseason over the years. And Julius Randle, he's a decent playmaker, but he really fell apart against Oklahoma City last year, especially in the pivotal game. So, like, to me, what drops them is that specific matchup with OKC, but they're a big physical butt-kicking team that I think is better than their regular season metrics would lead you to believe.
They're an interesting one. I worry. I mean, playoff offense, I'm curious to see how it goes. A lot of this is going to rest on Ant and his ability to kind of not just generate his own, which we know he can do. Where does he score on the court, and how much does he set the table? Jaden McDaniels, the offense is nice early. He has been interesting off of the bounce. Some of his ability to get to the rim and do some of the stuff with off the dribble is pretty impressive. He reminds me of Jeremy Grant when Jeremy Grant made his leap, in that there's some players who are like really smooth with it. You can say like, I can see the progression of this. His game still has a little bit of like really tall guy, awkward, but it's effective. It's not ineffective. It just doesn't look like Kobe out there, with like the smooth body control and everything. But he's so long and he's so athletic, and his touch is actually better than you would think. So it really works for him. I didn't have them as high up,
right? And then you?
What's that?
Do I have one more pick and then you? Is that how this works?
Yeah, you do. And we could round it out because we're up against time here. But Timberwolves, I'm just going to say they were not the next pick on my board. So it is kind of interesting here how wide of a net you can cast.
Oh, yeah. Once you get off of that top tier, all these teams are pretty close to each other. I have the Clippers next. I've been disappointed in them to start the year, but I am still a believer in Ivica Zubac as like a big matchup problem for a lot of teams in the Western Conference. Kawhi Leonard, I don't think he can reach the top tier level anymore, but he's still a legitimate second tier star in this league. They're very deep at a bunch of key position groups. They've improved their bench. It hasn't really come to fruition yet to start this year, but I've been a big believer in the Clippers roster construct.
This one, it's almost like there's not much you have to say about it. If you went off of your metric, talking about where the players are in the tier, they've got it. They've got a top tier center defensively who can do it. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, superstars that can create, and then role players around those guys that are really good and versatile. So they have all of it. But it's like, anytime we have one of these drafts, it's like you get stuck. It's like hot potato. You got stuck with the Clippers because there's still something about taking them. You have to do it on talent, but you feel a little rough if you ever have to be in the foxhole counting on the Clippers to come through for you, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Just to round out the show, man, I have so many options I can go from here, and I don't feel good about any of them. So I'm going to throw the ultimate curveball, and it's a curveball in part because I have to confess, this is one of the teams I have not watched enough of this year, but I have so much faith in one player in particular that I'm going to end up taking them. And that is I believe 6-2, or is it 5-2 Detroit Pistons. And this is one of them. Why I feel like I'm cheating. 6-2. why I feel like I'm cheating is I watched them earlier in the year when they lost, and then I watched one other game, and I walked away thinking like I'm not, I'm wondering if it's going to be a tough year for them. They've strung together some wins. I just have so much faith in Cade. I love Asar Thompson. Jalen Duren's having a breakout year. But then the question is, what is their starting lineup when everybody gets healthy here? I think that's part of it. But I have so much faith, first of all, in Asar Thompson and Cade Cunningham. I think that they give you this like versatility, just the same way we were talking about the Rockets, where physically you have to match up with the size they provide. And then talent-wise, you have to match up with the versatility they provide. That's a really difficult thing. And Jalen Duren, obviously, you have to have a big on the court because he's going to grab every rebound, if not. The question, though, is what is their starting lineup? You have Harris, you have Robinson right now, Jaden Ivey, who we've been kind of waiting to see what he looks like with this team. I mean, that's part of when you're building out your future. He's part of it. And we just really don't have a sample of what this is going to look like. And then even if he is there and you plug him in, who goes to the bench? Are you going to play? I think it would be Tobias Harris in this one. But then, what is your shooting? Does it suffer? So do you have to go with Robinson? So I don't even know what their starting lineup is, but I have so much faith in the three guys I know are there that I'm going to put them there.
Yeah, the core four, really, Jaden Ivey when he's healthy. And by the way, Jaden did look good when he was healthy. He just keeps getting hurt. We'll see if he can eventually get his way onto the floor and stay. I actually like him.
And good in an area that I think they could use. Like he provides a counter punch to the punch that they are. So in theory, I think it works.
Yeah, he's like a downhill power guard who also can hit catch and shoot threes. Like he's got like a lot of like real complementary potential with Cade. The Pistons were weird to start the year because Cade was not good in the first couple of games, but he's been awesome over the course of the last week and a half. They've been toying with all sorts of different lineup constructs. We've been seeing a lot of Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren playing together, which has been successful for them to start the year in large part because one, Duren's been an absolute monster. He wants that second contract, you can tell. And then Isaiah Stewart just brings that just little bit of perimeter polish, which makes him functional as a secondary big. And honestly, I think the story of the Pistons to start the year is they are just one of the biggest, most physical, like pain in the butt teams to play night to night in the NBA just because of how big and physical they are. And I was especially impressed by them in the win against Houston with the job they did on Şengün. Like Şengün bullies everybody, and they bullied Şengün. Like that was a really impressive performance from them there. That's a really good pick just for fun. My 10th place team, because I thought there was a clear top 9, and then there was a drop. My 10th place team, I put the Bucks, just because Giannis plus shooting. And then we talked about them last week, so we don't need to go into any detail. But like also kind of going back to what I talked about earlier about having one of those true bona fide top tier guys, I think that really matters. And Giannis is obviously on that list. But this was awesome. I had a great time.
They were seventh on my board. I tell you, I get draft fever whenever I do these snake drafts. So they were higher on my board, but I went around them. I think the teams we didn't mention, I mean, the Orlando Magic's starting lineup with Suggs, Bane, Franz Paolo, and Wendell Carter has actually been really good over the last handful of games. But obviously the story has been more about the disappointment of their season so far. You can make an argument for them. The Blazers are not going to get a lot of love in this just because the name part of this, when you were talking about top end names, but look at what they've been doing with that lineup. It's unbelievably athletic and long, what we've been talking about. I trust that they can actually defend. And then the Spurs were the ultimate one to me where I just have no idea what they're going to look like. We haven't seen it yet with Fox and Wemby, Castle, Barnes. So it's one of those lineups that I think actually will be pretty good. Spurs fans might be mad and say, hey, look at this, and the numbers might bear it out, but they almost had too many questions for me to say, like, I know what this is going to look like.
Yeah, I want to see Fox. I think Wemby needs some help, specifically with a guy that can set him up with more advantages. And I think Fox is the type of dynamic offensive force that can do that. I remain a big believer in Steph Castle, but I just don't think any of their guards are at the level yet where they can really make life easier for Wemby, and I think Fox is going to help with that.
Yeah. Let us know. Go ahead.
Magic will be here for another 20 minutes, so.
They're already mad at me, man, because you know what it is I love the Magic. I went hard on them. I was like, they're going to be great this year, and they're letting me down and making me look bad, so now I'm upset. Go ahead and cue that outro music there, James, and if you can, pull up the board here so we can take a look at this. This is what we ended up going with. You took Nuggets, Lakers, Rockets, Timberwolves, Clippers. I went with Thunder, Warriors, Cavs, Knicks, and Pistons. Let us know in the comments, who do you think got the better draft and which team was left off the list? Yeah, the coastal bias, big market bias. Let us know in the comments who the biggest snub is out of our 10 teams. We didn't take maybe Chicago, the 6-1 Chicago Bulls, who starting lineup has looked pretty good. Let us know in the comments what you guys think, and make sure you're subscribed so you catch all of these. Back with Legs on Monday and Wednesday next week. Back with Timpf on Fridays. We hope you enjoyed the show. Hit that like button for us on the way out.
We all silly like the mayor.